On Story is brought to you in part by the Alice Kleberg Reynolds Foundation, a Texas family providing innovative funding since 1979. From Austin Film Festival, this is On Story, a look inside the creative process from today's leading writers, creators, and filmmakers. This week's On Story, Academy Award-nominated screenwriter and director Tony Gilroy.
I directed every movie I ever wrote. I never wrote a movie that I didn't direct. I mean, even when I didn't know what I was doing, I was directing the movie, you know? And I think that's a really key. You're not writing a script. You are making a movie in your head, and then you're trying to be a journalist about telling the reader what that movie looks like. It should really be real for you.
In this episode, Academy Award-nominated screenwriter and director Tony Gilroy discusses his work on the Bourne series and his Oscar-winning film, Michael Clayton.
Doug Liman had made Go, which I loved. Doug Liman had passed on my favorite script called Wild Kingdom 6 months earlier. And they sent me this absolutely drecky thing. And I went, and because it was a New York meeting, I went downtown to meet Doug. And I said, look, I'd never met him before. I said, look, loved your movie. This meeting is totally under false pretenses. There's no way in hell I'm ever doing this movie. And I just need to know, like, why did you pass on Wild Kingdom? And why do you want to do this?
How did that go?
Well, Doug was like, oh, well, Doug, he's Doug, and well, and a thing, and I don't, whatever, and like, why don't you like it, and what's wrong with it? And I go, oh, man, there's nothing in here, you're not at the issue, I don't know if I had amnesia, and I didn't know who I was or where I was. The only way I could figure out who I was is like by what I knew how to do, and do I know how to hammer a nail, and do I know how to diaper a baby? And I have to figure out, and so all the things I figure out are bad. I guess that should be your movie, but you don't have any of that in your movie. This sucks. It was like this gigantic monster spy movie. It was crazy. And I left that meeting, and I went to the movies. And this was back in the day when there was answering machines. I saw my answering machine, and I got back to my office after seeing some movie, and there was like 38 messages. And I'm like, what is this? And it's like, call me, then your agent, call me, then call me, then studios, call me. He had left the meeting at Puffy's and gone over to Brad Pitt's apartment and pitched him all the shit that I had said negatively about the movie, and that's what they wanted now. And so I had 10 days, I had 2 weeks before we were going off on Proof of Life, and I said, well, so I sold 2 weeks. And it was sort of like a 40-page document, lots of dialogue, had every scene in it. And Doug actually was like, God, man. Doug came to the Federal Express at 3 o'clock in the morning in Columbus Circle when I was mailing it. And there's a photograph because he thought it was such an historic moment. He said, I'm going to shoot that document. We don't even need a script. And he came, and I haven't even thought of that in years, and came and did that whole thing. Now, things devolved from there. It's this shambolic failure to success, the whole Bourne. It would have been one of the great Hollywood books if someone ever could have had access, or if it ever could have been told, like the 20-year history of the shambolic success of how this worked, and all the people who hated each other, and all the things that got fucked up, and everything that was just a mess, and it just kept succeeding. And when we did the first one, we didn't know how to do the second one. And it wasn't until there was a really strong, emotional, soulful idea that we moved forward. And then they got stuck at the end of 2 for, 5 years. No one could figure out how to get to 3, and I was off campus. And then being able to figure out the solve for Ultimatum, how they could get back to that, was one of the craziest things I've ever done. And then they were relaunched again.
What does he want me to do?
You're an experienced negotiator. Negotiate.
Come on, I'm here because some lunatic pulled my name out of a hat. Look, your kidnappers clearly want to make a deal. They got back fast, they're responsive, they're specific. You clearly have something that they want. So call their bluff, tell them I'm out. Let the downside of that ring in their ear for a little while. If they bite, great. You have your first concession. Honest to God, I'm a little surprised. I thought I'd be seeing Cal here tonight. Cal Riley.
Cal's the hostage.
Beirut came out last year, and Beirut I wrote 28 years ago, originally. I had to collaborate with myself from 28 years ago to try to tune it up, because I was like, oh my God, they're actually gonna get the money to make this thing. You know, as I went through, there were a couple things, I mean, look, you can see the genetic material in there from Michael Clayton. You can see me working on a lot of the same issues. Somebody who's been cast adrift, and someone who's driven past the exit, and has a, you know, in one case an alcohol problem, in the other case a gambling problem. When I got in there, I was like, holy shit, there was a lot of card games. And there were 2 big card games in the beginning in Boston. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna get killed. I gotta get rid of it. So I was like, and Brad didn't really want to get rid of it. I'm like, dude, you have to get rid of this for me, because otherwise it's gonna look like, you know, like I'm just repeating now, I was repeating myself, but I never thought that movie would get made. And it was just in my, so that's a place where you can see your work. But if you're talking about the projects that you wrote that, I mean, I think the best scripts I've written have not been made. There's 3 of them that I think are, I mean, I love Michael Clayton a lot, but it's not the most important script for me that I ever, that I wrote. And I'd say the 3 most important ones are the ones that haven't been made. I think maybe one of them has a chance someday if somebody wises up. The other 2, I think, that sort of maybe have passed their expiration date. One in particular, I did this script about paparazzi called Wild Kingdom, and that was this huge breakthrough script for me. That's the one that I think will never get made. And I really just changed everything about how I wrote when I got into it, and I was completely free. And then I've written some other scripts along the way where and we talked about Dolores Claiborne, where I'd never done flashbacks or anything like that. I'd been trying to be really straight. And that movie, all of a sudden, that freed me up. You're looking for points of liberation, I guess, and you're looking for places to, you know, stay excited. And, you know, you're not just, you want to keep changing the form. I always want to keep pushing.
When Beirut ended up being found again, so when you get that call that, hey, we want to resurrect this one,
right.
Is there hesitation just because it was old?
On my part?
Yeah.
No, just incredulity. Like, they're never going to get this thing off the ground. Good luck to you, you know? But I was amusingly disdainful of that this would ever happen. I was like, okay, good luck to you. This will never happen. Call me when oh, we have John Hamm. Oh. We had Brad. Oh, well, you're never getting the money. Well, then they set a budget. I go, you can't make the movie for that. You cannot make the movie for that. Well, they did.
What drove you to not just be the writer passing your script off? And, you know, was it just working with a couple of directors who did not fulfill what you thought your script could be? Or?
Nobody ever does, really. I mean, look, I directed every movie I ever wrote. I never wrote a movie that I didn't direct. I mean, even when I didn't know what I was doing, I was directing the movie, you know? And I think that's a really key. You're not writing a script. You are making a movie in your head, and then you're trying to be a journalist about telling the reader what that movie looks like. Every single one of them is a movie in my head. And so the dissonance between what it actually is and what you had before, sometimes there's things that are, I mean, there's all kinds of times that things have been improved. And I've learned a lot along the way about how things shift in transit. I don't think anyone should ever be slavishly devoted to the script.
Did you want to be a journalist at some point? Because you clearly do.
There's a lot of journalism in the work. Uh-huh. And the Beirut movie was the one that really taught me that. I hadn't done a research movie at that point, and that was pre-internet. And so it was like the library and newspaper filings and thousands of books. And I really built this library of Lebanon in my office for a year and really taught myself how to do it. I really like learning about becoming a ridiculously stupid, superficial expert on something for a year and annoying everybody with my pretend expertise. And then foisting it upon the public, and like people go, wow, you're like an assassin, and you're like a soldier, and But when I say that, the other thing, I mean, you should be reporting on a movie that's real, not writing words on a page. One of the great things about being a screenwriter, doing journalism, you can go into somebody's office who will never talk to a reporter. And you're not turning a tape machine on. You go in and you say, hey, you can lie to me. It's cool if you lie to me, you can make amalgamations. I don't have to have sources. I don't have to have an editor who's gonna back me up. Tell me essential truths. Make me know what I need to know about your world and what it is for me, but you don't have to. And like, we got into places that would never talk to a journalist.
You talk about that moment of clarity with each of these
when the movie drops for me, that's the sensation I have when I'm like, ugh.
So it's a physical.
It gets natural. All of a sudden the movie gets natural. And you can't it up, really. Legacy. I took a lunch with the Ludlam people just to like, because Danny was working for them. I didn't want to be rude. And I said, well, I don't really know. I'd never seen Ultimatum because I was so pissed off. I said, well, I'll go back and watch Ultimatum. And if I think of anything, I'll let you know. And then I watched and I was like, I called Danny and I said, there's nothing they can do. I said, the only thing they could do is if they did something like that. And Danny goes, you should tell them that. So I said, oh, well, what if it was part of a larger conspiracy? Okay, so great. Everybody's really psyched about. And once again, I have all this architecture and all this jazzy stuff and, oh, the company and the Edward Norton character and how this fits in and how it tucks in. But I don't really have anything. I don't have that soulful center idea for this character. And I literally remember where I was. I was in the dining room at my mother's house upstate on like a weekend morning with everybody in this. And I was like, the idea that the drugs that they had given them had increased his intelligence, and the idea that he had been given, that they'd taken somebody with an IQ of 80 who had, you know, some sort of TBI on top of that, and turned him into just this insightful, open mind, you know, this brilliant insight, this transcendent intelligence, really, and forget about the physicality, but just been given that. And the idea that that could be taken away at will, I was like, oh my God. I've never had a stronger need in a character ever. I think it's the best movie I've made, to be honest with you. I love that movie. I think we underestimated what the change of Matt would bring, and I think that my concept of keeping a candle in the window, and my hope was really that this would be able to, I was really trying to tread water and put something really cool in there and expand the world so that they could come back and do anything they wanted to do. And in point of fact, I think there was an opportunity there at one point to sort of make a Marvel universe out of the whole thing that I was trying to create for them and really keep everything wide open. It was really intriguing material and big pharma and government and outsourcing of the espionocracy, and there was also incredible problem solving in that movie. Yeah, you know, that I got to do some things in that movie that no one had ever done before. I have a movie where there's another movie playing behind it. I don't think I was like, wow, I went in the very first meeting and I said, here's a couple things I want to do, and one of them was, do you mind if I put this contemporaneously with Ultimatum, so that the events of Ultimatum are the trigger for this movie now? And they're like, oh wow, can we do that? And I go, yeah. And they're like, no. So no one had ever really done that before.
Who the hell is helping her?
Now back to Jen.
The FBI this morning confirmed reports that Dr. Albert Hirsch died of heart failure in a Washington, D.C. hotel. Dr. Hirsch had been expected to testify yesterday before a Senate Intelligence Committee. That select committee is investigating links between a troubled CIA program known as Treadstone and this man, Jason Bourne.
There's so many things in that movie that I really, really dig. And like I said, the central theme of it is so powerful.
But I mean, that one was one where you literally, once you came up with that idea.
Once I had that, once you have that, I have a script at home that I'm really stopping myself from writing, but it is a dropped script. I know exactly where it goes. I know the ending. I know what's driving, I know what's wrong with the central character. And because I have that feeling, it's like a gravitational pull. I want to go there. I want to get to it. It's like everything becomes fun when you know what the movie is about.
Do you not take a project if you can't have that moment, or if you don't have that moment?
No, I can't. I'm not going to do a whole Bourne thing, but they wanted the sequel for Bourne. And it was a very happy family at that point in time. I started writing, they commissioned me right away, and I started writing all this stuff. And I had all this jazzy stuff. And I had the whole thing in Goa and India, and I had him in prison, and I had a different way for Marie to die, and I had all this stuff, but it was all, and I had the, someone else is pretending to be him, and I had some of the basic elements, very jazzy, and I had a bunch of pages, and everybody got really very excited. oh my God, are we going to? I remember a meeting that we had in the Four Seasons in New York. Everybody flew in and the whole thing, and they were like really ready to start going. And I had this hollow feeling because I knew we didn't have a movie. There was no idea there. There was no idea in the movie that was worthy of what had been in the first film. There was no central thing. And I actually have found the letter cleaning out my basement a month ago. The letter that I wrote to Matt and Stacy and the rest of them saying, you know, I know everybody's really excited, but we're not there. We gotta we're not there yet. And I went really deep and I thought, what, you know, if his mate dies, if Franca Potente dies, what value does he have to anybody on the planet? And he hasn't really paid for his sins of the first film. He says, oh, I figured out I'm this assassin, I don't wanna be a bad person, but he hasn't paid for there's no price he's paid, really. She's now dead. And I was like, what value does he have anything? And it finally came to the point, well, God, what could be the only value? What could he give to anybody to, you know, have some sort of redemption? And the idea of coming up with the Russian girl whose parents he'd assassinated, who thought that the parents had committed suicide when in fact he had killed her. And this girl, that's the only person on the planet that he could give anything of value to. And I thought, well, that's the ultimate samurai movie. That is worth a movie.
Because you don't know how they died.
I do.
No, you don't. I would want to know. I would want to know that my mother didn't kill my father. That she didn't kill herself.
What?
It's not what happened to your parents. I killed them.
The moment I had that, I mean, I just love that idea. It just dropped. I was like, wow. He doesn't even, and I wrote to Matt and said, what if you say nothing in this movie? Like, are you willing to do a movie where you don't? Because, like, he really didn't have to say anything. It's like, once this happened, and I wanted to do a movie. My version was much more still in a way. Everyone was trying to figure out what he wanted and where he was going. And he was all leading to that apology at the end. And the movie got more confusing and ornate along the way. And everybody, there was lots of controversy on it. But the perfect pearl of it never changed. There was an article in Vanity Fair by a really great journalist who's just recently passed away, Bill Prochnow, about kidnap and ransom. The kidnap and ransom industry in the world, this big Vanity Fair piece. And he used as the axis for the centerpiece for the article, this guy, Tom Hargrove, had been kidnapped in Colombia. And it was interesting because his kidnapping had gone sideways and he'd been working for a philanthropic company and they said, we don't need kidnap insurance because we're philanthropic. And so his wife ended up doing a sort of homegrown kidnap thing, and it sort of was a great way for him to show the whole world of it. So a lot of people all of a sudden wanted to buy that article, and Taylor wanted to buy it, and Castle Rock, Ken knew it was one of those things where you like have 2 days to buy the article, and we put our bid in to buy the article, but I was only going to do it. I didn't want to, I said, I'm only doing it, and I really want to do it, and I really want to do it for Taylor because it was like the perfect movie for him. It was like literally building like he was in the Peace Corps in South America, and he speaks Spanish, and he's El Jefe, and all these things, and it was going to be in London, and it just was like perfect for him. But I said, I am not doing the real story. I've never done a real story. That's a whole other. And so I really didn't want to be trapped by the reality of what was in there. But I loved everything that was there, and we were one of the last three sort of bidders. And Taylor and I had to go to Germany and sit with the Hargroves outside Frankfurt where they were living, and like spend 3 or 4 days like in like a really intense, like in their family, like trying to convince them that they would be much better served and the issue would be much better served by us doing the film and fictionally. And they agreed, and then we were like, okay. And then we ran off and started to do the journalism on it. I went to London where the K&R people are, and we still didn't have the movie though. It's like, okay, he's kidnapped and it goes up, and the wife, and there's going to be the thing, and we're going to go, what are we going to do? And we went, and I can't remember his name, Peter, I can't remember his name, a boutique K&R brokerage in London. All these ex-military SAS and MI6 guys all going into business for themselves, selling kidnap insurance. Wasn't that boutique thing? We go in, talk to this guy for about 2 hours. He is 6'2". He is, you know, really British, beautiful soldier, beautiful suit. And fantastically charismatic. And Taylor and I leave. And along the way, that people are saying, well, you know, if we do the film, who is going to do your kidnap and ransom insurance when you make the film? Became a big issue. Like, we're not just doing a movie about it, you need it. So they're like, they're selling us. And we get outside to the elevator, and I go, Taylor, I go, if I get kidnapped when we make this movie, I said, do not put that with my wife. And we get in the elevator, and we get downstairs, and I go, dude, that's the movie. And that was the movie. I always have an anchor scene, like the scene in Bourne Identity where he's in the cafe. I wrote that scene first.
I can tell you the license plate numbers of all 6 cars outside. I can tell you that our waitress is left-handed and the guy sitting up at the counter weighs 215 pounds and knows how to handle himself. I know the best place to look for a gun is the cab of the gray truck outside. And at this altitude, I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start shaking. Now, why would I know that? How can I know that and not know who I am?
And I wrote that scene long before. I was like, wow, that's the movie right there. That's the movie. And it comes off the dialogue. And how do I get those two people there? And Clayton and I had the hit and run scene.
I've been a client at Kennerbach for 12 years. Do you think that I pay that retainer every month so I can give a place at the back of the line?
Mr. Greer, you left the scene of an accident on a slow weeknight 6 miles from the state police barracks. Believe me, if there's a line, you're right up front.
I can get a lawyer anytime I want to. I don't need you for that. We're not sitting here for 45 minutes waiting for a referral.
I don't know what Walter promised you, but I can
A
tell you
miracle
this.
worker. That's Walter on the phone 20 minutes ago. Direct quote, okay? Hang tight. I'm sending you a miracle worker.
Oh, he misspoke.
About what? About the fact that you're the firm's fixer? Or that you're any good at it?
Elliot.
The guy was running in the street! You take that, you add the fog, you add the lamps, you add the angle. What the is he doing running in the middle of the street at midnight, huh? You answer me that!
Had that scene long way beforehand. I'm like, wow, how do I make a movie around that? And
How'd you crack the code on Michael Clayton?
so we made Devil's Advocate. And then we were scouting around, doing all location scouts all over New York and doing all that. And as you said, that's how involved I was with Taylor. We'd go everywhere to do everything. And then all these law firms, you know, they had what you think a law firm is like, but then that was only like this one small part of it. There was this huge, like, you only see the restaurant, you didn't see the kitchen, you know, it was like, so we kept going back and going like, wow, there's all these other people, there's gotta be some movies back here, this is really cool. And I came up, thought, oh, that, and then I had the idea of a fixer. And I had that, and then I started talking to lawyers. I started taking lawyers to lunch, you know, and oh, come sit with a screenwriter and talk about, you know, and I took a lawyer to lunch, and she said, I said, you know, she mentioned the word bad document. And I go, what do you mean like a bad document? And she goes, we had a case, and if you go to law firms, they have all these rooms where the lockers and these little libraries where they put every case in a different sort of cavern, and these, you know, the case. She said, we had a decade-long case, $1 billion swing, and the case had been settled in our favor, and a second-year associate was tasked with cleaning out the room, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, he found a document that hadn't been put into discovery that destroyed our entire case. So I said, well, so what happened? She goes, well, 2 things happened. That's the youngest associate to ever make partner at our firm. And he was the last person to see that document. I was like, wow, that's a movie. There's a movie. So take lawyers to lunch.
You've been watching A Conversation with Tony Gilroy on On Story. On Story is part of a growing number of programs in Austin Film Festival's On Story project, including the On Story PBS series, now streaming online, the On Story radio program, the On Story podcast, and the On Story book series, available where books are sold. To find out more about On Story and Austin Film Festival, visit onstory.tv or austinfilmfestival.com.